if the 2003 invasion of Iraq should have taught us anything, is that it's not so easy to transform societies in the Middle East, and that U.S. forces are very good at overthrowing regimes. They're not that good at building up new regimes in their place.
And on the Michael Medved Show, it is always a distinct honor and pleasure to welcome back Max Boot, who is a historian, an award-winning biographer, a best-selling author, and a foreign policy analyst, in addition to a nationally syndicated columnist through the Washington Post. He's the author of the 2024 bestseller, listed by the New York Times as one of the 10 best books of 2024, Reagan, His Life and Legend. But before we get started with Max Boot, I want to remind all our listeners to subscribe to our YouTube channel, Michael Medved Official. Max, always a great pleasure to talk to you, but for some clarity, you've expressed a great deal of skepticism about the necessity for this war. Does it matter if the United States actually wins the war, which you believe to have been unnecessary? And how would you define victory, or how would one define victory in the conflict that has erupted already?
Yeah, I think those are all great questions, Michael. I guess I would kind of sum up my view by saying that I don't think this war was necessary. I don't think it was authorized by Congress, but that's not to say it's going to be unsuccessful. It could be successful despite all of that. I just have some qualms about this, and I speak as kind of a reformed supporter of the 2003 invasion of Iraq, which I supported for a lot of the same reasons that President Trump and a lot of other folks are saying we should be going to war with Iran now, having to do with the Saddam Hussein regime was evil. The Ayatollah's regime in Iran is evil. They've both done horrible things. They've fought American forces. They've threatened their neighbors. They've worked on developing weapons of mass destruction. So it's very easy to make the case like these are really bad people and we should overthrow them. And I agree that they are actually really bad people, but I think if the 2003 invasion of Iraq should have taught us anything, is that it's not so easy to transform societies in the Middle East, and that U.S. forces are very good at overthrowing regimes. They're not that good at building up new regimes in their place, and that a war that starts with quite possibly the best of motives and the greatest justification can devolve into a quagmire and a fruitless nation-building exercise for which the American people are not on board. And so that's, that's the mindset that I kind of bring to looking at the Iran war. I mean, President Trump is accurate in reciting all the horrible things that Iran has done over the last, nearly 50 years, including to the United States. All of that is true, but I just didn't see an imminent threat from Iran that justified this war of what seems to be a war of regime change that we're waging. There was no evidence that Iran was enriching uranium again. And I actually think that the June attack by Israel and the U.S. was far more justified than this one, because I think that did set back the Iranian nuclear program substantially, even if it didn't totally obliterate it, like President Trump said. But anyway, no evidence that Iran is enriching uranium right now, no evidence that they're building missiles capable of hitting the United States. And certainly President Trump has done nothing to bring the American people along. He hasn't made the case to the people. He hasn't made the case to Congress. He hasn't made the case to international institutions. He started this war with about 20% support from the American public. And obviously the war has gotten off, from our perspective, has gotten off to a good start, as you would expect, because the U.S. and Israel have overwhelming tactical superiority. They have tremendous military might that they're using against Iran, and the Iranian regime is very weak in terms of conventional military power. And so obviously, thanks to precision bombing and tremendous intelligence, they were able to kill Ayatollah Khamenei at the very beginning of the campaign, along with a lot of his other senior leaders. And again, nobody's lamenting their loss. I mean, the horrible, evil, tyrannical dictators who slaughtered the Iranian people, threatened their neighbors, the world is better off without them. But I just have and it's quite possible that this whole operation could work out to the extent that it results in reducing the threat that Iran poses to its neighbors, because there's no question that at the end of the U.S. and Israeli bombing, whenever that is, Iran is going to be greatly degraded militarily. Their nuclear program is going to be set even further back. They're going to be much weaker than they were a year or two ago. That's all true. But I just have concerns about where this is heading and what the end state is. And President Trump has thrown out a couple of possible end states, which are contradictory. On the one hand, he talks about encouraging the Iranian people to rise up and calling on the security forces to lay down their arms. And on the other hand, he talks about basically finding a collaborator in the Iranian regime, an Iranian Delcy Rodriguez, who will then do business with the United States. So, is it one or the other? Does he care which one it is? I mean, I have some problems with encouraging the Iranian people to rise up, and they're unarmed. They're just civilian protesters to rise up against these heavily armed, vicious, bloodthirsty security forces. I mean, we kind of saw that movie previously in Iraq in 1991, where George H.W. Bush encouraged the Iraqi people to rise up against Saddam Hussein, and then the Kurds and the Shia were slaughtered while the U.S. stood by. I hope that's not where I hope we don't see a replay of that here. Um, I don't think we're going to. I don't think we're going to, in the short term, see a moderate Iranian leader. I mean, we've been searching for Iranian moderates since the 1980s, still haven't found them. I don't think we're going to see a moderate Iranian leader who's going to sign basically instruments of surrender with the United States, uh, uh, which seems to be what Trump is demanding. So I think, the most likely outcome here is that after a few weeks, President Trump is probably going to get tired of bombing Iran. The U.S. Air Force is going to start to run out of targets. We're going to run low on munitions. The economic damage from this war is going to increase, and you're already seeing it now with spiking oil prices and stock prices falling and so forth. And, President Trump will probably end the war, leaving the current Iranian regime in place with new leadership. Uh, they're going to be weaker, so you can claim that as a victory, but I don't think you're going to see this, fundamental transformation I don't think you're going to see this fundamental transformation of Iran that is kind of the highest aspiration put out there by the Trump administration.
Do you think President Trump has now said that he is not ruling out boots on the ground, that he is not ruling out supplementing the bombing and the aerial war with actually using ground forces? Do you think that is likely to occur?
I don't think that is likely to occur, because I think the big lesson he drew from the Iraq War was don't send U.S. troops into a hostile country in the Middle East. So I doubt that he will do that on a large scale. But what that means is that he can talk all he wants about what end state he wants in Iran, but ultimately it's going to be out of our hands. It's going to be up in the hands of the Iranian people. It's going to be in the hands of the Iranian regime. We're not going to be able to dictate the outcome. To some extent, we're going to be uh, watching from the sidelines, because unless you're actually willing to send boots on the ground and topple their regime, you're kind of bombing and hoping for the best.
Do you think there is a role that Congress can play in bringing a successful end to this war? Obviously, Congress could help cut off the funding for the ongoing war, but that would be a disaster for the United States, would it not? Is there a constructive role for Congress to play here?
I mean, I think Congress should certainly register its concerns, and they're going to have votes in the House and Senate on a war powers resolution. I think it is important. That would not immediately cut off the war. It would still give it something like 60 days or whatever it is. But I think that is something that Congress can do, and I think it'll be interesting to see to what extent Republicans join Democrats in opposing the war, which is not that popular even with the MAGA base. But I think one of the things that concerns me here is the extent to which President Trump has ignored Congress and the American people. And to be sure, I want to be fair here and note that lots of previous presidents have used force without congressional authorization. This is not a new thing, but
Yes, so
it's just
you've written about that eloquently. A last
yes.
question. Lindsey Graham today said that the Trump and Netanyahu are a modern day equivalent of Churchill and FDR. Do you think that's a good analogy?
Okay, I think that might be a little over egging the custard, as the Brits would say. Don't think we're quite there yet.
Over egging the custard. Yes, we should be careful of that. The recent pieces by Max Boot are extraordinarily informative and useful and constructive in terms of providing the right historical perspective for what is a very difficult war. And I know that Max Boot joins me in wishing success and safety to all of the forces who are currently risking lives for the sake of this greatest nation on God's green earth.